Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hey, it's Heidi, your host, and I am here to give a few announcements. So first, I want to say happy holidays. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for supporting. And I just hope that you and your family have a great holiday season this 2024. And new announcement is that the podcast starting for 2025 will be weekly. So you can find episodes on a weekly basis. We're still going to keep the Tuesday schedule. So now you will find new episodes every Tuesday for 2025. And because I am switching to a weekly schedule, I am actually looking for sponsors. And the reason that I'm looking for sponsors is to be able to add someone else to my team. So I don't know if you know, but I run this podcast by myself. So I look for guests, I schedule them, record it, edit, and then we upload. I said we, but it's really me. Upload and just everything that goes on behind the scenes with the podcast, I do it on my own. And so I am looking to be able to add someone to the team to help me. So this is where the sponsors comes in. So I have advertisement packages available if you're interested in sponsoring, and we can talk in more details. You just need to send me an email at heidi@heididelacruz.com, and we can talk more details about that. So yes, sponsors for 2025 to be able to expand the podcast and add someone to my team. So if you are interested in advertising your business, or you are interested in just, helping the mission of the podcast to amplify immigrant voices and their stories, then I would be more than happy to speak to you in regards to becoming a sponsor for the podcast next year. Thank you again so much for being here. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. The podcast is growing. And so that's why I need help, because I still am releasing a lot of stories. People are very, very interested in sharing their immigration story. And I'm so thankful and grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for everything that God is doing. And now this announcement has gone longer than it should. So once again, thank you so much for being here. If you're interested in being a sponsor, let me know and enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidi De La Cruz, and today I have Miss Kathy. She is going to be talking about her experience growing up with immigrant parents and things like that. So, Miss Kathy, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited and honored to be able to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. And I was just mentioning a little bit right before we started recording that I feel like your experience is even more unique because you're first generation, but your parents actually came from two different countries. So
Yes.
talk to us about that, about growing up with immigrant parents from two different countries.
Yeah, thanks for asking this great question. So, my mom is actually Chinese, but she grew up in Vietnam, so she was for sure an immigrant. So, the Vietnam War she had to, she's a refugee, so she had to, have encampment somewhere before she came to the States. So she got lucky in that sense where, she was able to come to America versus my dad. He's from Taiwan, and he came here because his dad was in the military. And so he was able to come to the States differently. So they both met and randomly in Connecticut. And then, yeah, they started their lives there first. And then somehow my dad wanted to open up a restaurant in California in like a little small town, American fast food restaurant. Yeah, where we sold like burgers and French fries. Like, who would have thunk, right? In like a very white suburban town.
So like not your guys' cultural food, like American
Yes,
food. Oh,
yes,
wow.
yes. So it was very ironic in that sense too.
Oh my goodness. So you grew up in Southern California.
No, Northern California,
Northern
Northern
California,
California.
sorry.
Yes. No,
California.
it's okay. Yeah. So it's been so different because my mom actually speaks three languages. She knows how to speak Cantonese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. So, so she was able to communicate with my dad, who spoke Mandarin, because in
Nice.
Taiwan, Mandarin's the main Chinese language that we speak. Because, in Chinese, there's a lot of different dialects.
Mm-hmm.
So in our household, we spoke Mandarin, but it's funny because I can understand Cantonese. My mom's like actual, nationality, like she's from, mainland China, like Hong Kong. So I know a different dialect, but I don't know how to speak it.
But you understand it. Okay.
Yes.
And so where you guys, where they opened the restaurant, is that mostly mainly where you grew up, or was it in a
Yeah.
different neighborhood? Yeah.
Yep. So I was born and raised in a small town called Morgan Hill in California. And yeah, we were obviously like one of the only Asian people in that community. Luckily, it's like a small town, so people were more, um, I guess, open-minded and nicer. But in school, it's different, right? You're
Yeah.
you're always going to be picked on for being different. So I remember I'm ESL kid, so English is my second language. And I remember going to school and not talking because I
Mm,
didn't know how to speak English. And I was a very quiet, like more of the minority, you know, Asian good citizen, like just being there, just showing up and just
yeah.
being quiet and doing my part. So I just grew up most of my childhood like that, very shy, insecure, because we're immigrant kids. So it's like you're already different and our
Yeah.
lives are already hard too. So I was like, I don't want my life even harder at school.
Mm. You were able to visit the home country from your parents, and I didn't
Yes.
ask which one it was. So, which one
Oh, it's
was it that
okay.
you were able
Yeah.
to go visit?
I was able to go back to Taiwan a couple times. So all my dad's side of his family is there, which is really nice. And Taiwan is such a cute little country, and I believe that Asia is probably more safe and one of the safer countries than like, the US and other countries. So it was really nice to go back to visit.
Nice. So I can't remember Singapore. I remember I follow this
Mm,
writer from Singapore, and
yeah.
he released very interesting article about how his daughter was staying late at the university. It was like midnight, so really late.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, okay, thank you for letting me know that she was going to stay late, and to get home she had to walk home. And he was like, but I have the peace of mind that nothing's going to happen to her
Mm-hmm.
at midnight walking home because of
Yeah.
the safety. But of course it comes with different things. So it was just
Yeah.
me and my husband had a whole discussion about it. Is like, yeah, like, they have certain freedoms or certain
Mm-hmm.
things, but it's like that safety, like just knowing that she can walk home at midnight and nothing's going to happen. She's going to be fine. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, like how you
Yeah.
mentioned that, how it's a very safe. But yeah, so he was saying how, like, again, like the whole safety thing with his daughter. And I was like, oh, that's such an interesting,
Yeah.
thing, like at midnight, like you wouldn't think of that. Like,
Mm,
well, depending
yeah.
you are in the United States, but yeah, like you just wouldn't think to walk home at that time. So
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the US now, it's like you're very cautious about everything that you do because, like there's just so much like craziness going on, and it's kind of sad to see, especially with kids, like the mass shootings at school,
yeah,
etc. So in Asia, like especially in Taiwan, like they don't have access to guns and stuff like that, weapons. And I think the culture itself is different too. They're
yeah,
more like, like they are more thoughtful to like the elders and the kids. Like they're just people there are more respectful in a sense.
yeah,
So it's just different. It's just for
yeah. It's
sure a
different.
different culture. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got culture shock when I first went at a young age. That's for
Well,
sure.
that was my next question. So
Yeah.
what were the culture shocks if you had more than one when you went to go visit?
Yeah. So in Taiwan, like they have a lot of street food, so that was different,
Oh,
so different. I mean, the food is delicious and like it's so cheap too. Like it's very different where you walk a lot too in general. I mean, in the US, mostly in California, we drive everywhere.
yes.
You know, so we're not like in a area where we can just walk. So everything's like very walkable and their public transportation is super clean and that's like what everybody really uses, like public transportation and it's super safe. And you see all these kids going from like the subway like one stop to another and like yeah we did that at a teenagers like my sister and I and my cousin like us three just went and like went around the whole little country or a town just like ourselves and we didn't even think twice like anything bad was going to happen so in that sense I was like whoa it's really nice and for sure like I said the culture in general like everybody is very polite and helpful if needed. And for sure, at that time, like they didn't see a lot of kids from America either. So then like they were like, "Oh yeah, you're from America. Like you know how to speak Mandarin even though you're, and I'm like, "Of course. Why not? Why wouldn't I be able to speak my own language?" A
Yeah.
lot of kids don't like if they're born here, like their parents them to speak English so then they can fit in into America, enter society.
Yeah. No, it's crazy because that reminds me of when I would visit the Dominican Republic. Like, my
Yeah.
family knew immediately, or my cousins, and they would
Yeah.
like say that I wasn't Dominican, that I was really
Yeah.
American. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, I'm Dominican. Like when people ask me, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm Dominican.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's funny because they call us ABCs, so American born Chinese.
Really?
So yeah,
ABC.
yeah.
Interesting.
They're like,
That
"Oh, you're
make you
ABC?"
did that make you feel some type of way?
Yeah, I guess I was like proud in a sense, but then like not at it in a because I'm like, as an immigrant child or you grow up with parents not being and raised here, like you're always different. So I felt like I was
Yeah,
never always fit in somewhere, even in my going
I
back
know.
home, like, you're still not fitting in, even though you're Chinese. But when you're here in America, you're like, oh, you're Chinese, but you're not white or American, real American. But I'm like, I believe I'm super American. I was born and raised here. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we do have that sense of trying to find our identity as first
Yes.
generations. Cause again, like the Dominican
Yes.
or like, our cultural, they'll say like, oh, we're not too, or we're too American for them. And then
Yeah.
it's just like, where do I belong? Like, no,
Yeah.
like I am just me. I represent
Mm-hmm.
both. Like I'm proud to be
Yeah.
both. And yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. You totally get it. It's true. The first generation, we are the middle person, right? Like
Mhm.
we are the middle people for our parents. Like, my parents can't speak English that well. So like right now, my dad passed away. He was the one who always handled paperwork, but now I'm like the one who's helping my mom out, reading all these paperwork and helping her out. And that's a lot of what the first generation kids have to deal with. And our kids unfortunately don't have to because we know how to, we know how to read and we know how to,
Yeah.
when we understand, our language as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so
it's
sorry about
different.
the passing of your father.
Oh, oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Do you think that the American dream differs from native born Americans versus immigrants?
Yeah, I think so because our parents' generation, like they're from a different country, so they come to America thinking that's the real American dream, being able to build a business if they want to, or like raise a family and start anything from scratch and be able to make a living. And being born here, it's different. Our American dream is just being able to have the access to education and then just getting a job, right? So it's like two different things. But I guess in general, the American dream is just being able to live in a safe country, right? And then being able to just earn a living and have a family. but their definition was more of a like freedom. But
Yeah.
we, as a native born, we're already born with freedom, right? So it's like so lucky in that sense. Like my
Yeah.
mom, she was a refugee. Who would have known? She said many times she would have like probably died if
Mm.
like she didn't have certain things, and that's hard. Like fleeing a country that was in a very very bad time with war, that's very dangerous. And like my dad's time too, like my grandma, she had to flee China because of the war with the Japanese and Chinese, so that's how they ended up in Taiwan. So it's like a lot of war back in the day. I mean, there's
Yeah.
still war going on now, but not in America where we are dealing with that right now, like
Yeah.
in our own country.
Yeah, for sure. It's looking at the history of the United
Yeah,
States and just looking at like the wave of people that have come in a
yeah,
certain period of time. And
yeah,
it's like, okay, well, let's look what was going on in their country. Like what was, that
yeah,
brought these people here. And that's something that
yeah,
is not talked about. And that's one of the
yeah,
reasons why I started this podcast. It's like,
yeah,
just to share these stories that I feel are
yeah.
very important, especially in today's times.
Yeah, thanks for having this platform and coming up with this, because this is so needed. And, before we even came onto this podcast, like today's recording, I already told you, I was like, yeah, this, like, people need to hear our stories, and you give that platform, which is so
Yeah.
beautiful. So it's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you so I truly, truly love this. Like this is what I
Yeah.
want to do
Yeah.
full time. Like this is what I want
Yeah.
to do. Yeah. So let's talk about the work that you do.
Okay, sure. I love that. So I am actually an empowerment coach, and so it's pretty much a life coach, and I just help people overcome, any adversity or obstacles in their life, and especially people like who suffer with like health issues, with infertility, endometriosis,
Mm.
because that's the things that I had to suffer with, but I overcame them, and mental health as well.
Okay, so I was gonna ask you how you got into
Yes,
that work. So you mentioned a little bit that that was something that you
yes,
suffered with. So if you're willing to share.
yes, of course. I always love sharing my story because I think it's, a topic like with women's health is kind of taboo. Like growing up, we didn't
Yeah.
really learn about women's health, which is so sad. And thinking back now, like I remember what my teenage years, they just taught us like, oh, if you have sex, you're gonna have a kid. And
Yeah.
that's what I thought my whole life. Like seriously, they barely taught us anything. That was our sex ed.
Hmm.
And then so when I really started trying for a kid, that's what I thought in my mind, because both my sisters tried once and then had a kid. So then it
Oh
was so sad for
man.
me that I had to go through infertility for 2 years with my husband. And, ever since I was little, I always wanted to be a mom. So this was something that was really hard on me. And in our culture, right? Like, we don't talk about infertility, and everybody thinks like once you get married, you're just gonna pop out babies, and it's not that easy,
Yeah.
You're like, I wish it was that easy, but it's different nowadays, like with a lot of stress, and our society is just, so fast paced. But anywho, so I suffered with infertility to find out that endometriosis was the reason why it was causing my infertility. And then I was in a very depressed state, so my mental health was not good at all. But finally, I was just so sick of like taking pregnancy tests every month, like only to get negative,
Negative. Yeah.
results. That was tough. I should have not done that. But like when you want something so bad, like that's all you just have like a tunnel vision of that.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I wasn't really doing anything for my health or my well-being. I was just pretty much like crying every night and like drinking my sorrows away, trying to like,
Mm.
numb my feelings, I guess. But then my twin sister told me, she was like, Kathy, like you're going down this really, really negative, road. Like you're not even who you are anymore. And she's like, "Are you actually doing everything in your power to make this happen for you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, yeah." I'm like, "I'm working out," and and that was like the only thing I did, but I really wasn't, right? Like I was
Yeah.
drinking, being depressed. So then I changed my whole lifestyle. I started eating healthier. I went to go book like appointments with specialists. I started trying to figure out, like, empowering myself to figure out what was going on with my body instead of complaining and having a victim mindset of like everything's against me. I was like, all right, I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure that this happens, or at least that I can say I tried everything in my own power to make it happen. And if it doesn't happen, then I know in 100% like that's not meant to be. And short story is I did IVF. We did one round, then I got a miscarriage. But then, like,
Mm.
finally, this whole year, like 2021, at the end of the year, I ended up getting pregnant right before our second round of IVF. So I got pregnant naturally, and I totally believe it was because I empowered myself and did all the things that I needed to do and had hope to, overcome these things. And so now, being in that really depressed state and overcoming it, I know a lot of women suffer with this too. So I want to just help other people too who are going through these things and knowing like my story, and if I could do it, like anybody can.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course.
And I know, I mean, I didn't suffer from like infertility, but like it took months. So I know the
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
of like getting that negative
Mm-hmm.
test and over. And I did suffer a miscarriage, and
Oh, I'm
that was
sorry.
really hard. So I'm like,
Oh,
I can just imagine. And so many, and then actually when I suffered the miscarriage, that's when I actually realized how common it actually is.
yeah.
but but
Yeah.
people don't talk about it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is something that needs to be talked about, like a
Yeah.
lot. One, because it's like one in every four women. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like so crazy to find out so many women around me had actually suffered. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, how it's just not talked about. And then also, I don't like how people say, like, oh, you need to wait until you're 3 months pregnant to announce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything can happen in the pregnancy at
Yeah.
any time, which is
Yeah.
also
It's
another
true.
thing I learned, because like just listening to different stories, like, unfortunately some things happen at 19 weeks, 20 weeks, like
Yeah.
at any time during the pregnancy.
Exactly.
And it's such a traumatic experience. And I really think that for some, not everyone, for some, talking about it once they're able to, obviously,
Yeah.
when talking about it, it can be part of the healing process. And then also
Yeah.
let other people be seen. Like, man, me
Yeah.
too. I went through that too. So
Yeah.
thank you for being open
Of course.
and vulnerable, and then helping others who have been in your shoes to, that transformate do that transformation. And yeah.
Yeah. Because I just knew like how lonely I was because I felt like I was the only one in my group. And then like when I told my story, I felt at first I was very shy to tell it, but and then I just felt like it was a great avenue for me to just release all my feelings and emotions. And then I just found out a lot of other people suffer through miscarriages, like what you said, like when you go through something like that, and then other people are like, oh my God, you did too. It's like,
Hmm.
what? How come? Yeah, like, well,
Yeah.
normalize it. Or like, at least be able to talk about it and have a community of women come together, or even your friends and family to comfort you and not like hold it all in yourself, like what we're taught to.
Yeah. I also think that companies should offer grieving days for this,
Yeah.
because
Oh, you're right.
I remember having to go to work. Well, not I wasn't. I was actually working from home at the time because it was like during the pandemic. So I was working, but I still, like, I had no energy to do my job. Like, I was grieving. And I remember when I had told my supervisor at the time, she was like, no, you need to take some days off. Because she had gone through it, so she knew. And she was
Oh,
like, no, you need to take days off. to recover. But obviously, that was going to be time taken off my PTO because, there's no sick time or anything like that. And it's just like there should be a separate time for grieving this type of loss because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to go through.
Yeah. It's so true. And plus, like when you do have endometriosis too, like we have crazy period pains, I feel like work should be able to give women time off if that's what we need, you know? And it's like, again, women's health is always underrated. Like they always put us down.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
anything anything we talk about women's health, they think we're complaining and like we don't have our own rights. It's just so crazy.
Yeah.
Being
I,
women is tough.
It is. It is crazy because literally just I think today or yesterday morning, me and my friend were texting and we're on the same cycle, which is crazy. I mean, if
Oh,
it happens
yeah.
when you hang out.
Yes.
Yes. So we're on the same cycle. And so I was just like, I am so glad we work from home because
Yeah.
it makes, that time of the month a little bit easier to deal with than having
Mm-hmm.
to like go to an office and
Yeah.
have all that pain and just feel very uncomfortable. So I'm just like, these are the days that I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I work from home because
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough being a woman.
It is. It is. But, being a woman, look at us. Like we're doing all these things and
Yeah.
we're, being on this platform. So thank you for, making this, creating this. And, I have a daughter. I don't know if you have a daughter or
Mhm.
you have a
I
kid.
do.
Oh,
Mhm.
see? So it's like, we're showing our daughters like what they can do and achieve.
Oh my gosh, my daughter loves pretending to be me.
Oh my
Like
gosh, how
I
cute.
have a video of her. She like after I had recorded, I had walked out and then like the
Mhm.
equipment was still up and then she came and she was like pretending to be me. So I was like recording her. I was like, "What are you doing?" She was like, "I have a business and I'm a podcaster." And I'm
Oh
like,
my gosh, how
"That's not how
cute.
I act, first of all." But it is really nice and just showing her that you can achieve your dreams and whatever you set your mind to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Well,
beautiful.
thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much for this time. And to wrap
Yeah.
up, the last question that I love asking is, what does the American dream mean to you?
Oh, this is such an amazing question. I think the American dream is just being able to have freedom and safety and, you know, the ability to do anything we want in this country, which is beautiful. Like, if we wanted to start a podcast, you can do it. If you want to start a business, you can. Like, we're not restricted in that sense. I mean, there's a long way to go, but at least we have the opportunity, which is beautiful.
Yes, yes, it is. Oh, such a beautiful answer. Thank you so much for that.
Thank
And
you.
how can people connect with you if they want to connect with you?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, so my handle is Kathy.Mou, so KTHY.MOU, or I'm on Facebook and TikTok at Kathy Mou, no dot. And then you can check me also at my website at www.kathymao.com.
Perfect. I will include all those links in the show notes and the show
Awesome.
description. Thank you again so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.